I was just talking with my mother this morning. I said, Mother, I know I have family in Norway, and I'm just wondering who I might tell about. And I just want to let you know that I have a great-great-grandfather, or at least I did, whose last name was Olson. We had his picture on our wall for all of my growing up years, and we like to laugh and talk about that because my mother used to say, he's my mother's mother's father's mother's father, and so now I get to say he's my mother's 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 father's mother's father, which I thought was kind of cool. Anyway, he was a pastor in northern Norway, and up near Lapland, from what I understand. Anyway, so you've asked me to talk about some things, Eva, and to just share some things from life and gospel ministries and where I've been and what I've been through and what God has done for me. And so I'm going to try to do that. I am proud of my heritage as a Norwegian and as a Swede person as well, although in the United States that usually comes out as being one who roots for the Minnesota Vikings, because I don't really have a lot of connection directly to Norway, but I'm grateful to be Norwegian. And so I'll just start talking about some of the things that I've been through in my childhood. My father was a literature evangelist all of my life. He came to faith in the Lord in his early 20s and spent much of his life in his passion, which was as a literature evangelist, going door to door, selling books to people and sharing with them what God had done for them or for him. I remember Dad being gone a lot, but he was out there sharing God's plan for people and giving them books and selling the books, and he spent a lot of time doing that. We had a lot of fun when I was a young person. We did move around a bit. We moved every 2 to 4 years. Spent some time in Missouri and South Dakota, West Virginia, Ohio, Missouri, whatever else, Nebraska, and then eventually I ended up in Wisconsin, where I spent much of my professional career. But we did enjoy traveling. Dad made traveling fun. He was a traveler, and I enjoyed traveling. My mom and my brother and I went traveling a lot of different places and enjoyed eating a lot of different food at different potlucks, at different churches that Dad was sharing literature evangelism and it's and the fun of it to all those people. I was raised to go to church schools all my life. I went to grade school in Missouri and then in South Dakota. And then I went to academy in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and also in Columbus, Wisconsin, and then on to college at Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, where I met my wife. I did feel somewhat driven to find something, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. And over time, of course, I came to realize that I needed Christ in my life. But having Dad gone a lot did affect my feeling like there was something missing. I'm really grateful, though, that in the waning years of his life, I was able to live near him and near Mom. They moved to the city that I was working in, and we were able to share time together and catch up on some of the lost moments. I had one experience at the beginning of life almost that really colored all of my experience for probably the next 47 years. And that was that when I was 3 years old, my best friend died. And although it wasn't until I was in my 20s that it came to my realization, the situation with that kind of came to mind through waking up in my dream, crying my eyes out for my friend Danny. I kind of came to the realization that I was missing something in his relationship with me as well. But what I took from that was when I came to the realization that I was doing a lot of bad things in my life, I was destroying my marriage or destroying myself, and I went back to God and wondered whether or not he would love me. It was comforting for me to realize that things in our lives that happen to us color where we end up in ways we can't see, and they're not always our fault. And so it helped me understand that there could be a loving God that could understand us even though we were doing what we shouldn't be. And maybe we even walked away from him, but he can continue to love us because he recognizes that we didn't get this way on purpose. And that was really comforting to me. My wife and I, we got married. We were living in Berrien Springs. We moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. We started having children. Our first son was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I started my career in accounting as a CPA in Wisconsin shortly thereafter. Following that was the birth of our daughter, Emily, and continuing on with my public accounting work. And I did that for about 16 years until one day my brother shared with me a DVD from Pastor David Gates back in about 2010, where with some really great sermons on them, and I'm sure you've heard of him. But anyway, I was watching these videos. I was thinking, wow, these are really great. I've got to find some more of these, and so I went to the website for Gospel Ministries and did find some more videos, but I also found a job request. They were looking for an accountant that understood QuickBooks, and I'm a certified public accountant that was certified in consulting QuickBooks, and so I thought, well, I certainly could give that some thought. I did start contacting them, and eventually they offered me the position as a volunteer to work doing accounting for Gospel Ministries. And so that kind of is the short version of how I got to where I am. I'm just going to pause for just a moment. I felt for a long time that God was with me. I was baptized when I was 12 at the church camp in northern Minnesota, North Star Camp. I never really felt that God was mad at me or that I was trying to run away from him deliberately, but I did spend quite a lot of time not really focused where I needed to be. I got myself addicted to some things that weren't helping me, especially in my relationships, and most especially with my relationship with my wife. And so that caused a lot of trouble. Then, and finally, about 2001, I came to the honesty with my spouse about the things that I was into that were causing the problems, and we started building from there. Unfortunately, the building eventually crumbled 17 years later, so I can't say that all worked out just beautifully, but I can say that God was in it throughout, and that he held our hands, and that today she and I can get along even though we aren't any longer together. A lot of pain and suffering and prayers and anguish and crying over that over a number of years, and but nonetheless we are moving forward. Wow, I'm moving fast through this material, but in any case, I did reach a point where I realized that I needed to take responsibility for myself. After coming here to Gospel Ministries, I was still carrying a lot of burdens in my heart, things that I hadn't dealt with, that I felt like I needed to go back and deal with, things where I had apologies I felt that I needed to make, and things I needed to make right. And I can attest to the pain and suffering one can put oneself through when avoiding those things and choosing not to deal with them. I was avoiding what God was asking me to resolve. And it was scary because I really didn't want to have to go to those people. I didn't really want to have to say, these are the things I'm sorry for. And God took me there. He helped me get through that. And praise the Lord, 2 years ago, almost today, I'm able to say that things are moving forward, and I'm past those things. God has lifted for me a huge burden of depression and anxiety, and I'm living in a different way than I've been, and I've been really glad, because ever since about January 2017, I've been able to say that life is moving forward, and I'm grateful for it, and not just stuck in this big thick cloud of depression and frustration. One thing that was a struggle in our time here at Gospel Ministries especially was that my relationship with my spouse was getting more and more volatile. We were having more and more troubles with relating to each other. even while working here as a missionary, even doing my best for the Lord, and even trying to be the best husband I could be. But I'd created so much pain in her life and so much trouble in the past, and it just was something she couldn't get over. And so I asked the Lord, I said, you know what, I really want this to be solved. I really want a solution. I'm begging you for a solution. Um, and I don't know what to do. So I was counseling with some folks that do some family counseling, and the husband of the two, he said, you know, you just need to start praying to become the house band of your home. And I thought, well, that would be useful, because I've always kind of not really been in that role. I've kind of let things go. I've always been under a cloud. I've never been able to be a leader and carry my weight as far as being part of the household and being respected for that. And so I did. I started praying for God to make me the house band of my home. And 2 years ago today, I came back from dealing with the things I had to work through and getting over the depression and anxiety that I'd been through. And God did make me the house band of my home. Ironically, he had to empty it to do it. It wasn't really my first goal. It wasn't what I wanted, but he did answer that prayer for me. And so now we're moving forward. I have a 21-year-old daughter in Michigan who lives with her mother and who is pursuing a career in engineering. She's partway through her studies. And I have a son who lives with me that doesn't believe in God too much, isn't too happy with God at all, but he and I are growing closer together, and God is drawing his heart back toward him. If you look behind me, you can see that there's a desk and another computer, and some months ago, about 3 months ago, I put it on my heart, the Lord did, to offer my son a job. You see, I hadn't been able to spend time with him much. He didn't want really anything to do with me. He carried almost as much bitterness against me as his mother had, and so I had to do some catch-up work. But I offered him the job working as an accountant in our office because I needed an intern, and we normally have one hired from Southern Adventist University. And so in my prayer to the Lord to be able to spend time with my son, because I wasn't getting very much time and I didn't know how to work that out, I offered him the job as my accountant assistant, one of them, and he took it. So I've been really praising the Lord and thankful. Not only is my son within arm's reach of me about 5 hours a day, but the people here at Gospel Ministries are such warm and friendly and loving people. They're taking him under their wing. We have one of our staff that gets my son out for lunches about once a week, takes him out, spends some time with him, and we've got some mothers in the group that mother on him a little bit, and I'm really grateful for them. And so I'm watching the Lord kind of feed my son some goodness, some positive things, and slowly he's turning around. So that brings me to single life. It wasn't what I had planned. It wasn't what I was hoping for, but it's where my life has taken me, and so I'm accepting it because I'm choosing to believe that God is with me and that he's ordered the events, even though it's making the best of something I would have liked to seen differently. I've found me. I'm grateful to have found me. I'm realizing that I can now try new things. I can experiment with new things. And I wanted to be who I am and develop my own expectations of where I wanted to go. And so now I'm trying new things. I'm trying out different avenues in addition to working here at Gospel Ministries. I'm trying to flip houses. I'm trying to learn how to play a violin that came from family in the old country, I believe, and I'm just trying to take on new things that I can do now because the Lord has freed up my time and I can focus on going a new direction. One thing that has brought a lot of joy and a lot of meaning into my life over the last number of years is just continually seeking the Lord for solutions. I refused to give up. I refused to accept where I was at, even though I was the cause of it. And I've been holding on to him and trusting in him to lead the way. I firmly believe in the text where it says that if we ask for wisdom, we can ask of God for wisdom, and he will give it to us without partiality. And so I'm looking with encouragement toward receiving that wisdom, and I believe that he is doing that for us. We have to believe we're getting the wisdom, otherwise we won't get any at all. And so that has been a comfort to me that God does in fact want to give us wisdom and wants to order our lives. So kind of up to this point, you might say that I've lived my life without a lot of personal direction, moving it the way I would want it to go. I felt carried along for the longest time. I felt like I didn't have any control. I felt like I just was being moved along. I didn't realize that I was making choices. I didn't realize that I was more involved in the direction that I headed than I could see. I just felt like everything was pushing me to the direction that I went, and not generally in a good direction. But so from age 35 to 50, I've been seeking restoration with God, and finally dealing with the things I needed to deal with. So now, starting at age 50, which was 2 years ago, January 2017, if you will, having faced the monsters in my life, I began to live as my own person, standing up for myself, even standing up against myself, recognizing that I am sometimes my biggest enemy, seeking purity of thought, focusing on serving the Lord and staying close to him. And God has breathed new life into me. Each day I can truly say that life is better than it's ever been, and so I'm grateful for that. One of my closest friends told me that the Christian experience is about experimenting, which I thought was interesting. I was used to just letting everything carry me along, and so this past couple of years, finding freedom from depression, finding freedom from anxiety, getting over some of the things I needed to deal with, I've been experimenting and seeing where the Lord wants to take me. Rather than just assuming he's going to take me and I'm just going to sit back and watch, I've decided to look for opening doors and see where they'll take me to. And life has really started to get interesting. My life is busier than ever, and praise the Lord, my brain is working better than ever too. I don't feel overwhelmed, even though I'm chosen to take on more than probably I could ever accomplish. I took the position here at Gospel Ministries International back in about August 1 of 2011. So I've been here a little over 7 years. God brought me here to take over the accounting department. And what they didn't really tell me was that I was kind of going to become the manager here, because the accountant ends up being the ad hoc person holding David's position in this office while he's gone, which is most of the time. So that's been an interesting balance, to be kind of in charge, and yet when David's in town, he's in charge, and trying to stay in synchrony with where David wants to go, what David is thinking. That's always been a challenge with a boss that is all over the world and traveling and speaking and going places and doing things, and wanting to follow his instructions and wanting to be led, and yet kind of having to do some of my own forging forward and seeing where it takes us. It's a very complex set of books. We have missionaries in I don't know how many countries, but well over 20 or 30. David has some numbers that he uses, and it's quite a lot. And my job here at Gospel Ministries, intrinsically, the basis of it is that the donations come in, and I am responsible for getting them to the right place as fast as possible, because our missionaries have the mindset that we move forward as soon as we have the availability and the ability to. So there's always projects and ideas and plans that are in place that are just waiting for the opportunity to move forward. And sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes we get a landslide and things happen really quickly. But nonetheless, this set of books is really a complex one, and I'm honored to be responsible for it. I am grateful that about 3 years ago, the Lord sent me an assistant. I had been crying out to him, saying, please, Lord, I can't do this job on my own. I need help. And he sent me some words through the scriptures that he was sending me an assistant, and he did. My assistant's name is Margarita Fortunato. She and her husband are about my age, and they have children about the ages of my children, and I couldn't survive here without them. OCS helps with things that are around the building, the facility, between mowing and maintaining the property and things like that. And Margarita has taken over the responsibility of most of the data entry as I've moved from entirely accounting into doing more managing related stuff here at Gospel Ministries. I can't possibly imagine a more fulfilling job in some ways, because I get to meet new people, I get to minister to people, I get to minister to the missionaries, the people in the field are getting some really great service. I believe the Lord has given us the skill to move money for them quickly, so that when something comes in, they can make use of it as fast as possible. We have to live by faith here, however. The team here at Gospel Ministries International lives by faith, just like all of our missionaries in the field. One of the things I'm really happy about with the way we do things here is that the Gospel Ministries doesn't take any overhead money out of what we forward on to the missionaries. The missionaries receive donations that come from their family, their friends, their church family, and wherever else they have support coming from. It comes through our office, and then it gets moved on to them. And Gospel Ministries doesn't take anything out of that on the way through. This office actually lives off of the work of David Gates. He is the lead missionary for this location, and so it is his contacts and his preaching and his influence that affect what comes in that we then can use for operations here at the local office. And so I'm grateful, because when someone says, well, how much of a cut does the administration take out of your donations? And I can honestly say, aside from the cost of moving the money to those missionaries, we don't take anything from them. So it's a really neat kind of a system. And it was kind of a change. It was really kind of an amazing way of thinking to get used to the way money is done here at Gospel Ministries, however, because God doesn't have this habit of sending us more than we need, and he doesn't have a habit of sending things for things that we don't need. He tends to send money just when it's due. So for instance, for about the last 7 years now, when I go to pay the mortgage, I don't pay it until the last minute on the last day that it has to be done, because the money doesn't arrive till then. And it used to stress me, because I would know that technically the payment is due on the 15th. I knew we had a grace period of 15 days, and I'd kind of like to get the payment done closer to the 15th. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the Lord had to teach me that he would be faithful even if I had to wait until the 28th. And so for many months, for quite a number of years now, the money for the mortgage arrives very near the 28th, and we don't have late fees because it arrives in time, but we don't have it arriving earlier where we can feel comfortable having had it arrive well before its due date. Sometimes the way that money flows through here affects other things. Like, for instance, you're probably aware of David's sermon, Even at the Door, which has created a lot of talking and a lot of people studying and a lot of positive things, a few negative things, but it's been a positive thing overall. But some of the negative experiences with that, so there are just a few people that have really given David a hard time for the direction he's going in his preaching. And Aunt Becky, she really takes that to heart. She's got a very tender heart inside, and when David is under some stress, she feels it even worse than he does. And so one day she asked the Lord, she says, Lord, she says, I'd really like you to give me some kind of a confirmation that where we're headed and what we're doing and the preaching David is doing and the perspective that you're giving him is appropriate. Not necessarily that every aspect of what he's saying is perfect, or that there aren't things that he needs to learn or change or transition, but that we're headed in the right direction. And we had a satellite bill that's about $16,000 a month that was 2 months in arrears, and the next payment, the third month that was due, was coming up pretty quick. and it's never been that late, and it was kind of a stressful thing, and Becky was feeling really sad about that, and so she said, Lord, if you really want us to keep moving forward and feel good about what we're doing and growing in what David is preaching, could you just pay the satellite? She started that prayer at the beginning of a week, about 4 weeks ago, and she prayed it throughout the week. David wasn't in town. He was out traveling, but Becky was here with us at the office, but she didn't tell any of us about it. She was just praying it. And Friday that week, David came visiting. Actually, he came into town. He flew in and was going to spend some time with us here. And Becky had gone to the airport to go pick him up. And I called him on the phone, and I said, guess what? God has just paid the satellite bill. Becky had wanted to know before November 1 that David was headed the right direction, that they were doing the right thing, and that God would please confirm that, if he would, before November 1. And on October 31, God saw fit to pay that bill for her. So we're grateful that the Lord does use his timing to encourage us and to strengthen us. And that was just one of those things that were pretty neat. Another thing that I've enjoyed working here at Gospel Ministries, I've enjoyed about it, is watching the Lord work in people. Now, sometimes we have difficult people, and they come, and then they're difficult, and then they decide this isn't for them, and they go do something different. Other times people come, and they're not sure whether they want to make a full commitment to become missionaries or not, and they're in this valley of decision. But it's neat to me to watch when the Lord moves upon someone's heart and tells them that it's okay to trust in him, to leave the security or the perceived security of the jobs in the workforce, and to let go and let God take over being their sustainer more completely. I saw that happen with our receptionist. We have a receptionist, Hilda Ramos, and she had worked for us part-time and was working in a secular position part of the time, and we needed a receptionist. But she could choose. Did she want to be a receptionist getting standard wages, or did she want to be a receptionist working as a missionary, actually sacrificing in the amount of money that she would receive? And so Uncle David had a talk with her about that, and it was neat to me to see how the Holy Spirit moved in and impressed upon her to become a true and genuine missionary, trusting him by receiving only a small stipend instead of receiving the normal wages we would have given her if she was working at going rates. I'm just grateful that I can watch the Lord moving and affecting people and seeing them coming out of their positions in the world and joining our ministry. Of course, everyone that works here has done that. Was what I did. I left public accounting and came here, and everyone else that works here is in the same boat. And so it's neat to see people making those decisions. There was a point several years ago where we were raising the question, will people really leave professional jobs, quality professional people? Will they really leave those jobs and come into ministry work? Because the lure of money, the lure of security perceived in those jobs is pretty high. But over the last 3 years especially, we've seen quite a number of people that left jobs for working at Boeing, working for the large computer companies, having successful businesses, and deciding to move into living a life of faith. And so that has been a joy and a great experience. And so, although in the earlier years of my being here at Gospel Ministries, we had quite a lot of a struggle, we had a lot of transition, we had a lot of staff changes, it's been neat to watch, especially over the last 2 years, and maybe even 3, where God has brought some really great folks here that are developing a family environment, a family mindset, a family feeling amongst each other, and we're able to begin to move forward as a team. We have a media team. We've got people that are helping me in accounting, some additional people. We've got editors and different people doing different kinds of work. And but it's neat because we can feel like now God is moving us forward as opposed to being kind of stuck waiting for it all to congeal. One of our new people that came a couple of years ago, his name is Diogenes Dominguez. We call him Dio, and his skills touched my heart rather significantly because he's a music man. He especially is talented at composing, arranging music. He's not so much a poet as much as he is an artist with the music that the poetry goes along with. But I'm also a musician. My musicianness comes from singing. That's my passion. And so Dio and I have a project right now where we're slowly moving through songs in the hymnal and creating some music that I can sing as if I want to sing a special music at church, or if we want, and we're also recording me singing the music so people can get a hold of that eventually, but we're still in the stages of producing that music. We haven't quite got that worked out. Where do I feel drawn to go from here? That's an interesting question for me at this point, because I got a lot of things in my mind that the Lord has put on my heart that He'd like to see happen. My personal nature is to want to be a caretaker, and I get to do that here, to care about people, to think of them, to long for ways to be helpful to them. But I also would like to see God use me in some way that gets outside of these walls, that allows me to be used to help some people in the community. With my father being a literature evangelist and us living in many different states, I never got to feel like I was part of a community. And even in Wisconsin, when I was a public accountant, I lived in one city and I worked in another. And so now that I've been here in Tennessee for some time, I just asked the Lord to help me begin to put down some roots in a place, to begin to get to know people in my community, and to then find ways to be a blessing to them. And partly that's because of the growing conviction that we're in the time of the end. We need to be prepared for ourselves, but then we need to be helping others prepare. But another area that I have on my mind and on my heart is that some time ago I got a burden somehow for Sunday keeping pastors. I was reading some material by the evangelist Lewis Weir from back in the 30s and 40s, who explained that when Babylon falls, ultimately, when the people realize that the end has come and probation is already closed and they're lost, that those Sunday pastors are going to pay for it. The people are going to turn the weapons of destruction that were going to come at us as Sabbath keepers, as keepers of God's law. They're going to turn those weapons against their... I just lost my video. Let's see if I can get it back. Okay, here we are. They're going to turn those weapons against their leaders, the pastors, the priests, the teachers that have placed them in this predicament of finding that they're lost and it wasn't expected. And so I've had, ever since reading about that concept, about the peril of Sunday pastors and of the leaders in all of these other religious backgrounds, that I've wanted to have some sort of opportunity to minister to them. And interestingly enough, in the last, a couple of months, the Lord is beginning to open doors for me to maybe join the pastoral. There's an association of pastors in the city that I live in, up in Cleveland, Tennessee, and so it looks like the Lord may be opening doors for me to begin to mingle with Sunday pastors, and I'm just curious to see where God takes me with that. Another burden that I have, having failed miserably at married life, is to somehow begin to have a ministry in helping others that might be making some of the same mistakes that I've made, or might be oblivious to the needs of their family, and do a little bit of counseling, a little bit of helping people. I've done a lot of reading since the point where my wife told me that she was done, and that she just had to move on and do something different, and that I just had taken more than my share of time to get well. From that point forward, I focused on getting well, and I focused on reading, and it seemed like, too much, too little, or too little and too late, and that's fine. I'm apologizing to her for that, but I still have a burden for marriages. I have a burden for people that are hurting. I have a burden for the ignorance that we just are born with as to how relationships work. And so I've been spending a lot of time in the last couple of years reading, trying to understand what I did wrong, how I could do things differently, what it is that people really need. What do husbands need? What do wives need? What really works? And so I'm looking for an opportunity to see the Lord branch me eventually into sitting down with people and asking those questions. What does your wife think she needs, and how could you begin to help supply those things? What does your husband need? I think there's a big need for people to simply be willing to ask the question, and not ask them to tell what their spouse needs, but to tell the person, look, go ask your spouse what they need. My guess is that there's a fair number of wives out there that have an idea what would really be helpful to them. And I suspect there's some husbands out there that are in the same boat. And I think the biggest thing that needs to happen is they need to surrender their life to Christ. But in addition to that, they need to begin communicating and asking, what can I do to be a better spouse? What can I do to be a better husband or a better wife? And so I'm hoping that the Lord is going to open doors for me to begin doing some counseling like that. And I'm just watching to see where he takes me. Another burden that's on my heart that came to me through some business and associates and some reading that I was doing is the concept of the opioid epidemic that we have here in the United States. There's just a ton of people that are hooked on painkillers, some really dangerous painkillers, to the point where their lives are so miserable. They're in such tough shape emotionally. They're suffering from depression. They're trying to find a release from all the stress that's coming upon them. And so they're looking wherever they can get it. And initially, an opioid sort of drug can make them feel whole again, can make them feel free from all those burdens. And lifting that load is just huge for them. And so they try it, and they just can't imagine how wonderful it feels to be free from all of this baggage that's been burdening them for all this time. Unfortunately, each time they take more of it, it takes increasingly more to get the same feeling. And so they're dying almost left and right in some places in this country from overdosing by taking more and more of the product that they've become addicted to, trying to find freedom from the great load of guilt or anguish or pain or suffering that they're going through. I read an article about the opioid epidemic, and it really touched my heart. And so I'm looking for a way for the Lord to use me or use gospel ministries, or to start some sort of a ministry that would reach out to them. I happen to be personally a member through some consulting I do in accounting with the Chamber of Commerce in Cleveland, Tennessee. And so I've begun interacting with people in that forum, asking about the needs of the opioids, the condition and the situation in Cleveland, Tennessee. And I'm finding that there's tons of it, and people are aghast because they don't know what to do. And so I'm asking the Lord to find solutions for some people. I'd like to be part of that. I'd like to see what the Lord will do for the hurting and the wretched, and that need to be set free from some of these terrible bondage issues, drug addiction, and people with tough marriage situations. We've got 25 minutes to go, and so I think that's more than enough time. I've had one of our people here at the office came to worship in the morning one day, and he said, there's this place outside of town, about 25 miles from here to the north, that's called Advent Home. 228 acres of some beautiful land with some farmland and some woods, and it'd sure be neat if someone would start a ministry there, because it used to have a ministry and the ministry kind of collapsed and about 6 years ago, and it'd be kind of neat to see something change with that. I didn't pay much attention the first time he brought it up, so a few days later we were talking in worship about where we might move forward in different kinds of ministry, and my friend Harvey brought it up again. He said, you know what, we should go look at Advent Home and see whether there's something gospel ministries could do there, or if there's some ministry we should start there. And I don't know whether we will or won't. I don't know whether we can or should, but I do know there's hurting people, and it'd be nice to have a place to minister to hurting people from. I also know that it's about time we start thinking in terms of getting out into the country, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The last couple of years, our group, most of the people here at Gospel Ministries, have been attending a camp meeting as kind of our Gospel Ministries retreat. We've been going to the camp meeting held by speaker Pastor Jeremiah Davis. He's spending a fair amount of time preaching with David Gates in different parts of the world these days, and we've enjoyed going to his camp meetings. And one of his messages, in addition to the urgency of the times and the approaching close of probation and the need to be ready, is the need to move out into the country. Gospel Ministries, our location here, if you were to Google it, you would see that it's kind of a fishbowl. It's right out in the open when people can drive by on the road nearby. We are out in the country, but anyone driving by can see almost the whole place. There's not a lot of privacy for people walking around our campus. And so I was listening to Jeremiah Davis in his speaking, and he was saying that we need to move out into the country, but not just for that purpose alone. He said we need to be setting up outposts. We need to be evangelizing cities, but we need to be doing it from someplace that's safe out in the country. And of course, we know that Mrs. White has been saying that since, well, I don't know, about 1880 something, that we need to get into the country. And so I just thought it was encouraging to hear that a pastor was saying, hey, let's take this up. Even though it's almost near the end, there's still time. If the Lord is answering this prayer, let's do it. And so I kind of see this opportunity with this place called Advent Home as maybe a place where we might do that, but I haven't seen the doors open for that yet. I've been up there to visit with them and talk with them. The director has become a good friend of mine, and he and I are both just waiting to see what the Lord wants to do with that property. I can't tell you whether Gospel Ministries will move there, or whether we'll start something new there, or whether someone else will move into that place and do a ministry there that serves the Lord, but I know that the place is vacant, and it needs some kind of usefulness restored to it. I've been doing a bunch of reading about true education. Pastor Jeremiah Davis has talked about the importance of true education, that these outposts, as we create outposts, they need to be places where people spend time not only in learning in books, but in learning by doing. And I'm thinking in terms of the Advent Home property being used as kind of a missionary college, not so much to send missionaries into the field, but to raise up people who can go out into other places in the United States and become outpost creators of their own. So I've been reading about true education. I read the book Living Fountains, Broken Cisterns, which was written by the well-known educator E.A. Sutherland back in 1900. I've also been reading the book Studies in Christian Education, also by E.A. Sutherland, where he talks about how the Bible is to be our primary authority and source of education, how we need to have our schools out in the country far enough so that they aren't affected by the pollution from the cities, and how we need to have simplicity of buildings. We need to think on functional scales, but not on overwhelmingly large scales that cause us to think we need to move into debt and carry debt loads on our properties. And I've been doing some reading about the Madison School, which Brother Sutherland and his friend Percy McGann and Mrs. White started, which was supposed to be, and was for quite some time, an example of what true education was supposed to be about. They had a work-study program Everyone, including the teachers that taught other classes in the mornings, were expected to spend time in the work program, helping not only for their own exercise, but for they were supposed to be money-producing, economically positive activities that help support the ongoing nature of the organization. And so I kind of have a burden to see such a school started again. Many of our education institutions in the United States have gotten away from a work-study program and are a little more in line with the rest of the United States in the way education is done. And I would like to see God produce a school that goes back to that pattern. I'm excited about the property at Advent Home in that it has some really neat attributes. And once again, I don't know if God's going to take us there. I'm just asking the Lord to make this property useful somehow. But it's 128 acres of buildings and houses. 65 acres, no, it's not 128, it's 228. In any case, there's 65 acres of farmland, 160 acres of woods and ponds, a mile of river frontage along a beautiful Hoasi River north of here. It has room to grow. And so I'm just asking the Lord to make plain to the director of that facility and to the rest of us, what does he want to do with that property? There's a price tag involved. It's not cheap. So we're waiting for the Lord to open doors with that. Why do I want to move there? I would like to see God do some really neat things there. I would like God to produce a school where people truly find home. I can tell you that over my path over the last 52 years, I've really felt like I wasn't really where home was. Home wasn't where I was, even though my parents, I suppose I felt like I was at home until I went off to academy. But since leaving academy, I've been searching for home. In the last couple of years, I've found home. Jesus Christ has brought home into where I am. But I know that there's many hurting people, and there's many marriages that are functional but aren't really polished up and working well. And there's a lot of people that don't know what home really even feels like. And so I'm asking the Lord if he will use this property for the purpose of helping people feel inside of themselves that they have found home. Another thing, if the Lord allows us the opportunity to do this project, that I would like to see happen, and I think is critical to see it happen, is to see God recreate his image in the individuals, and especially in the husbands and wives that would come there for training. We'd like to teach people how to grow crops. We'd like to teach people how to preserve their food. We'd like to teach them how to build simple housing, how to have skills that they can use that can make them money so they don't have to rely on their W-2 employee wages. To know how to make their own clothing, to know how to have domestic animals around, maybe sheep. Maybe someone wants to make their own thread, and I mean, who knows what all people want to do, but there's all kinds of things we can teach. Electricity issues, plumbing, different functions of how houses work, how buildings work, how systems work, water systems, electrical systems. There's just many things we could teach there. But if people come to this property, I like to call it Welcome Home as the name for the place. It's just the name that I'm toying with. But if people came to a place that said, welcome home, I would like them in the process of being there to find God recreating his image in them. Another thing that ties on to my listening to Pastor Jeremiah Davis is the need to be able to thrive in the end of time, being connected to God properly so that we're not just cowering and shuddering and scared to death. Yes, things are going to be traumatic. Yes, we're going to go through some terrible things. But that doesn't mean that we have to be pathetic puddles in the corner. I would like a place where we teach homes and families how to thrive during the end of time. I would also like to teach singles and families the skills they need to start or enhance, to start a new outpost for themselves, to move out in couples or in groups with skills that they can now start an outpost in a different place. and with the skills that they can not only do the things they need to do, but they can teach other people. So what I'm really looking for is to see the Lord create a place that births family-based independent ministries. I don't know if God's going to do that for me. There's so many other things that he's got on my plate. I don't know how to not be thoroughly involved in what's happening here at my local office with David. We don't know how that would make any sense, but I do have this great burden for a place that births family-based independent ministries, a place where people get healing, a place where people have the image of God restored in them. There are some challenges. Obviously, the thing takes money, and we don't have that started. The Lord hasn't opened that door. We're going to need some people, although I can say that we do have a crop specialist, someone that knows how to grow food, that is willing to return to Advent Home and work to make the ground productive. This last week, I talked with a lady whose specialty is food preparation and storage, preservation. She came and did a series of videos this week on how to can foods. She's into freeze drying preservation and other forms of preservation, and she'd like to come to this new ministry if it were to come into being. And so there's some excitement or interest building there. There's a gentleman that's on site that's looking to be one of the teachers for building trades. He has some skills in the building trades of building houses and working with his hands with wood. And so we have someone that's interested in participating from that perspective. And we have some really good friends here in GMI over at Laurelbrook Academy, which is a self-supporting high school about 40 miles west of here. And the folks there, Rich Sutton and his wife Pam and the school, are interested in partnering with new outpost locations, working together kind of as a team in different places and pooling resources and pooling skills. And so I'm watching to see just whether or not and when and how the Lord might draw this project into completion. What have I learned? I've learned that my primary passion is caring for and looking out for people. I so much enjoy thinking of others, planning how lives can be lifted out of mire and set on higher ground. I'm hoping that God will allow me to pursue and prevail in ministering to Sunday pastors. I'm hoping he will allow me to pursue and prevail in helping families prepare for the end of time, cope with opiate addiction, learn skills that they need, find happiness in their married lives. And yet I still continue to desire to be a blessing to the missionaries in the field. So I'm not sure just how that's going to work. But I do pray a prayer similar to that of Jabez. If you recall, Jabez said, "Oh, that thou wouldst bless me indeed and enlarge my coasts, that thy hand might be with me, and thou wouldst keep me from evil, that it might not grieve me." And God granted him that which he requested. So I'm praying that the Lord will just expand our coasts, enlarge our boundaries, expand the influence that we can be, not only just across the planet as David is out preaching and the missionaries are out missionarying, but even here at home in McDonald, Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee, here in Bradley County, that the Lord will open up doors and that we can be a blessing to our local community. And that's what I have to say.